Good morning. Yesterday, because of some disturbance in the internet, we have not discussed much. Only 20 minutes lecture was there. Today, again, the matter which is related to the enforcement date of the act, particular act. One of the Anil have also informed that, sir, on 20th July, Consumer Protection Act 2019 came into force. Therefore, whenever the act enacted after receiving the assent from the President of India and the Governor of particular state, as the case may be, then there is one further formality as per the mandate of the legislature to notify the particular act for its implementation or enforcement. That should be in your mind always, that automatically it doesn't come into the force. As I have said, that if you will see the Consumer Protection Act, which has received the assent from the President of India on 9th August 2019, but came into force for its implementation on 20th July 2020. In the same way, some other aspect related to, as I have said, about this enforcement of the act, which is under this course of media and law, the working journalist and other news employees, conditions of the service and miscellaneous provision 1955, and rules made there under, as these rules are of the 1957. Therefore, it has come into force from the 1957, because unless the rules shall not be made according to the provisions of the Parent Act. Parent Act means a act which is in force, under which the rules has been made by the executive, and there is one provision to lay down the rules before the floor of the parliament or the state legislature, as the case may be. If you will see the last sections of the particular act, that there will be the provision to lay down it in the floor of the house, as the case related to the either to the province, that is called the state, or the union. Because this is the technical, but at least if you will read the whole text of the legislature, it will be very easy to understand the spirit of the legislation and the mandate given by the legislature. Therefore, whenever it requires to be read, the provisions of law, it should be read by every student from first to last, and by understanding the language of the legislation. And because of the laying procedure, why the laying procedure of the rules is there, this is not a much difficult type of understanding of the law, but it is always in every under the administrative law. This is the subject matter, and this is the subject matter of interpretation, and this is the subject matter of the constitutional interpretation also. Therefore, one should know that laying procedure, what is the meaning of the laying procedure. If you will read the control over the delegated legislation, there are three control. One of the control is laying procedure. Meaning is thereby that whenever a law gives the power to the executive to make the rules and regulation, whatever is there, and it is the power of basically the legislature. It means it has been delegated to the executive, and whenever the executive will frame the law as known as the regulation and the law, that that is the function of the legislature. Therefore, it is the legislative mandate to inform basically to the legislature, to inform to the legislature by way of the laying procedure in the parliament. There are 7 methods also. You will read these 7 methods has sorry, laid down by the Supreme Court in Re-Delhi Lodge case. And this is the you will also read this aspect under the under the provisions of the delegated legislation as a subject matter of the administrative law. But I am just quoting here the basic theme that this is the system as it has been the technical system, interpretation system, and application of law. That should be in your mind also for the introduction of this legislation, the working journalist and other employees in conditions of service and miscellaneous provision, 1955. Then normally, if we will enter into the second part, another legislation is 1958 also. If we will enter into the another part, that is the section 2 under the first chapter, that is definitions of the words used in the particular legislation. Here the words which are used here, these definitions is given under section 2. As I have said earlier, that definition normally, suppose it gives under section 2 or some other sections of the particular legislation, these definitions can be applied only on those legislations which are relevant for the purpose of that particular legislation also only. A word is defined support under this legislation, because that I have explained in various times earlier also. If a word is defined under this act of 1955, which is related to the working journalist and other newspaper employees, service condition and miscellaneous provisions in 1955, these words cannot be applied in other legislation, or these cannot be applied in other matters, because other matters, the word, suppose it will be required to be defined or to explain or to interpret, the definition will be totally different, and that for that purpose, that particular legislation shall be taken into account or shall be taken into consideration for the definition of the particular word. That is the very clear aspect. The meaning, in short, the meaning of this analysis is that only the words which are used in a particular legislation can be applied for the purpose of the definition confined to that particular legislation. Confined to that particular legislation. This is very clear. It is not very difficult. Now, see the points which say that the what is the definition of different aspect relating to this definition. The first, as I have said, that alphabetically definitions always are there under the legislation, and the first is the basically of the board. And board, there is the board under this working journalist and other employees, newspaper employees, service conditions and miscellaneous provision 1955. It is a act which says that what shall be the wages and who will determine, who will fix the wages, who have the capacity, who have the power to send it through the this system. So therefore, there are the definition clause, and under the definition clause, the board means the what is the definition? Means the meaning is thereby that the board means only for the purpose of the fixing the wages. Board doesn't means as a adjudicatory body. It is not a adjudicatory body under 1955 Act. It is a board to fix the wages, to revise the wages, and to suggest the matter relating to the wages and other benefits or benefits for the working journalist and other employees, other newspaper employees, according to this 1955 Act. Therefore, it has been written in the definition clause that the definition of the board is the same as prescribed under section 9. It means the constitution of the board is prescribed under section 9. Whenever the word is written or the sentence is written that as prescribed under the particular section, it means that they immediately open that section and go through that provisions and try to read and understand that how it can be constituted and what will be the members and what will be their qualification and who will appoint to those members. The definition says that the board means the board means as it is constituted under section 9. Then immediately open the 9 and go through the 9, then read it, to understand what is the definition, we will see that one. There are two boards. One board is related to the journalist, means that the working journalist who are working as a journalist in the newspaper sector. This is one, section 9. Another is, there is the non way that non journalist, some employees are apart from the journalist. Journalist means the sampadak and all these, but some others are working, typing, they are arranging, printing, and they distributing all these. They are also called the employees. But there are two boards. One board is for only journalists, another board is only for those who are not journalists. Therefore, for journalists there is another board, that is under section 13C of this act. 13C. From very beginning, it is not necessary that the definition will come in your examination or in your day-to-day practical use of this act. But at the same time, we should have at least the capacity to understand the definition clause always. Mostly I have seen that the students are not bothered about the definition clause. Students are not bothered. Students means most of the people after getting the degree also not bothered about the object of the legislation, not bothered about the preliminary section of the legislation. But from beginning, it should be the habit to read everyone. So now there are two boards. One board is definition says that as prescribed and constituted under section 9, and prescribed and constituted under section 13C. 13C prescribed for the non-journalist. A board will be there for fixing of their wages and other service conditions. But 9 is related to the journalist. Therefore, this act divides the employees into two categories. One category is working journalist and another category is non-working journalist. Working journalist, what will be the working journalist? There is the definition of this working journalist also. First of all, we should know, because the section 2A, which said working journalist, is defined under section 2F. 2F prescribes about the definition of working journalist. Who are the working journalists? Who are the non-working journalists? The definition is given under section 2F. The working journalist and non-newspaper, that is the employee who are not working journalists. This is given under section 2C also. Therefore, there is, and 2DD, 2DD small d within the bracket. As I have said that whenever there will be the word related to the small word, this will be in bracket, and it means its relationship is some other clauses or some other provisions of the particular section. Therefore, it is within the bracket. And first of all, we are just interpreting the word as defined under section 2F, working journalist, because it is a news legislation for the LLM students. That's why I am just quoting the particular section, provisions, and subsection, interpretation, words. And otherwise, suppose there is a constitution required to discuss thoroughly without entering into the language of the particular article. Whenever it requires, then it is the duty to open immediately and to read that particular article. But here the act is totally new. That's why every word requires to be discussed with the help of the student who are the working journalists. At least it should be known by the student that whole time, part time, both. In some newspapers, the big newspapers, there are full-time journalists, whole-time journalists. But if you will see the small papers which are publishing periodically or weekly or daily also, some are their whole-time journalists, some are their part-time journalists. And the editor comes under the that working journalist. A letter writer, you might be seen that in newspaper there is the column in between where there is the editorial there for the editors, the letters of the editor. And the student can write the letter on the comments which is published, suppose today, in the newspaper. and that can be sent to them, they edit that newspaper, and newspaper will publish it. Then writer of the letter also, that comes under that part. Therefore letter writer, news editor, news, once it has been, there are the centers, small sub offices are there, and they are sending the news to the head office of the newspaper where it is going to be published. And then there are some editors also, and they are normally, after reading the whole news, they have the power to edit it, and what should be published and what should be the proper words, and what news gist can be published, because the paper pages are very limited pages, and there is the advertisement also, and very very vast news are there. Then it can be cut short by the editor. This is comes under the working journalist. The feature writer also, features are in the newspaper, if you will see, the feature writer, and the copy tester is also there, under comes the working journalist. Reporter is working journalist. A correspondent is under the journal. There's different names are there. The names are the editor, letter writer, news editor, feature writer, and the copy tester. Yeah, and at the same time the reporter also. Reporter, they are collecting the report and go by going here and there, and in the department, in the particular sector, and in the public, they are called the reporter. They are collecting the report. And then correspondent, the one has communicated to another. Then cartoonist, you might be seen the cartoon in the newspaper. The cartoonist is totally different. They are not the reporter, they are not journal, they are not the full-time editor, but their duty is totally separate. To make the, sorry, to make the basically the cartoon. And then news photographer is also there. It is in every sector. If you will visit in the newspaper sector, the separate photographer will be there. And most time you might be seen that if the news is to be recorded in a particular place, then one photographer and one reporter, at least two persons will go there. They are, thus the to report the matter, the one reporter will be there, or to take the photography, that photographer will also go there. And then at the same time the proofreaders is also there. Do you know the proofreader? Any student tell me the proofreader immediately, please give me the answer, because it is a good time to take the class from 9. If any student have any idea about the proofreading, if the student suppose will write the research paper, and after writing the research paper, before sending it for publication, what it requires, he has see, and he has typed it, or it has been typed by the typist. Then finally it requires to the one reading also. Then after sending to the publisher, suppose the publisher will send it back after the that published, not published completely, but rough publication is there, for proofreading also to the writer. If a writer is writing a book, and that book goes to the printer, to the publisher, and by printing the whole book, it is sent by the publisher back to the writer for proofreading. It is called proofreading. And to remove the mistake and to correct it, it is called a proofreading. In the same way, in every newspaper there are the proofreading also. Before publishing any newspaper, there are some proofreading also. They comes under the working journalist. These are the category of working journalist: whole time, part time, editor, letter writer, and news editor, features, cartoonist, copy tester, photographer, reporter, correspondent, and the news that proofreaders, that comes under the basically of the working journalist. This is called the working journalist. But who will not come under the working journalist? This is another question. Some student is not connecting, then that okay, that cannot be done. That is the problem. That may be the problem with the internet of that one, because yesterday I was also facing At night up to the 10, I was just searching here and there and taking the help of others also. Now, who will not come under this working journalist? Basically, it does not include the manager of the newspaper. Although the manager of the newspaper is to manage the whole business of the newspaper sector, but that will not come. Secondly, the administrator will not come. This is the administrative part. This is he is not or she is not the working journalist, and the supervisor will not come. Three categories will not come under the working journalist. These are the manager, this is the administrator, and third one is the that supervisor, because they are supervising the journalist also, working journalist and non-working journalist, other employees. They are the administrator, they are managing it, and basically they are supervising the function, but they will not called the working journalist. They are not working journalists. Then another aspect, if we say that about the that portion who are the non-working journalist, who are not working journalist, this is the definition given under section 2DD. Working journalist, you have understood very in a very good manner, and very that has been understood by all the students, because it's named of the act is the working journalist and the other newspaper employees service condition and miscellaneous provisions of 1955. That is the name of the act. Therefore, it should be in the mind that who are the working journalists, who are the other employees, non-working journalists of the newspaper sector, newspaper establishment, and non-working journalist definition you have seen under section. Which section you have seen? That the F. 2F you have already seen. Now come to the point that another definition of the non-working journalist. This is prescribed under the same section, subclause double D. Double D. It means it has been amended later on and continuous up to the 1996. The figures are available in the net, because you can also search, but the lecture method is to give the understanding capacity of particular words which is used by the legislature, and the spirit and the intention object of the legislature to be given to the student, so that if they will read it, it will be very easy to search the aspect. And that problem comes after the completion of the course also. In practice, most of the student or advocate in a first stage may not be in position to understand the meaning of the words. That's why the habit should be to read the legislation again and again. Then okay, come to the point that who says that the non-journalist newspaper, who are the non-journalists, they are the persons to be does not include other than the journalist, does not does not include other than the journalist, who are not journalists, who are not working journalists. Editor is reporter, and the correspondent, photographer, and you have seen that cartoonist is there, and later editor is also there, and features also, various categories are there. You have just seen the under sub clause 2 sub clause F of this particular section, where the definition is prescribed. But who are the non-journalists to the newspaper? The persons who are not come under that category. And there was one of the category which was the exception of this F also. They are three persons. Who was the first one? Manager. Number two was administrator, and number three was the supervisor. These words should be in your mind, because this is the morning hours, and fresh mind is there, and you might be in habit to memorize the words, for writing it, for understanding it, for the application of these words. And if these words will be memorized by the student, it will be easy for understanding of other words of other law also, and that will be there. Then come to the double T. which says that the non-journalist. First line it has been written, those persons who does not come under the journalist category. It means does not come under the category where it is given the definition, that is the subclause F. That is the subclause F of the definition clause. And if they are not there, others will come. And under that, but this other than the journalist, that working journalist, they will not come manager or administrator or supervisor. This is this will not come under that category. But other than that, everyone will come as a non-journalist who are working there. But one definition is also there, subsection C, which says that the newspaper employees, who are the newspaper employee working any other than the working journalist, any other than the working journalist, others comes under the newspaper employees. Because again, if we will see the title of this act, it says that the working journalist and other employees of the newspaper, service conditions and miscellaneous provision. It has written there. Therefore, the others comes on that part, which is the different than that. This comes on the newspaper employees. Other than the journalist, all are employees, but the three categories do not come under the employee. They are the manager, they are the administrator, and third one the supervisor. Neither they are the employee nor they are under that category of journalist as it has been prescribed. Now, one thing, what is the definition of the newspaper? How one will define the definition of the newspaper? Because this lecture introduction I have given 2 days back, and every student, it is a expectation that our presumption too, that every student should be aware about the words now, because he and she has gone through the legislation, because that this legislation is available in the website. And if you will search the Google, this is there. And a newspaper means the in the printed form, where there is containing the public news, containing the public news. If there is the private news, it will not called the newspaper. Private news cannot be published in the newspaper, because it is for the public, and it is in the printing form. Newspaper definition is very easy definition. Under subclause B, it has been said that where it is in printing form or published the public news there. There published the public news. It means the newspaper where there is a public news. Private news is totally different. It cannot be published in the newspaper, because it is for the public. It is open. It is open. When it is open for all, the indication I have received of the 3 and 4 minutes relating to this ending of June. And now come to the point which says that about the newspaper and news. One another definition, I will complete the definition also today. That is the D. Other parts I will not say something about it, and you will go through it. Prescribed, I have said that prescribed means to make the rules. That is the E or subclause E. But newspaper establishment means which is prescribed under subsection D. Double D, F, double D says that non-journalist, and the A says about the board, B says about the newspaper, C says about the newspaper's employee, and D says about the newspaper establishment. Establishment under the schedule, there is one schedule and explanation for the purpose of this clause. The different departments and printing press. The schedule, one schedule is there. And in the schedule, if the newspaper is a registered newspaper and that is working for the purpose of public news, and these newspaper, small newspaper and the larger newspaper and the weekly newspaper, some others are also there. There is a schedule, and you can search that one, and D says that about the newspaper establishment and prescribed. One point is triple E, triple small E, wages, definition of triple E under the section 2, which says that what is the meaning of the wages? That is the most important. Why there is triple E? Think whenever you are trying to understand the every word, including the that sub clause and other parts, we say that the triple E, wage, money, work done by the whom, by the employees of the newspaper, by the working journalist, by the non-working journalist, they are getting some remuneration, some money, and under that money, DA, HA, DA, dearness allowance, which is called in Hindi the Mehngai Bhatta, this comes under the wages. House allowance comes under wages, and the light, water, medical, other food, and so many things are there. But and basic pay of theirs, but does not. What are the parts which come, which does not come under the wages? This is the bonus and contribution for the pension and GPF, gratuity. This is not wages. This is not wages. Gratuity is not wages. Bonus is not wages. And the pension is not wages. Contribution of GPF is not that wages. But other parts, DA allowance, basic pay, house rent, lighting facility, if suppose that is being provided, and if that being water expenses that is being provided, and if the there is some other medical facility is going to be given to the journalist and other employees of the newspaper, this is called the wages. But other part, bonus and other things, bonus, pension, gratuity, and the GPF contribution will not come under the definition of wages, and it is prescribed under section 2, a subclause triple E. It means it has been amended time to time, incorporate some words and deleted some words, because the triple E is showing that the not it is a single word. So when it 1955 it has been enacted, but later on it has been incorporated so many things that if other words which are not prescribed under this 1955 act, we say that the working journalist and other newspaper employees service conditions and miscellaneous provisions of 1955, if any other word which requires to be defined and which requires to be interpreted and which requires to be applied in the with reference to this act are not defined under section 2, it means these words comes under the definition of the Industrial Dispute Act 1947. It means the definition which is given of other words which are not prescribed under section 2 of 1955 act are required to be interpreted, are required to be applied. Some words are used in this act to for that purpose. One clause is there, other words shall be applied as it is defined under the Industrial Dispute Act. Okay, it is final. Then it shall be applied as usme, and the words which has been said about one case relating to the other words, that is the case of Bient Coleman Company case. Please go through the original case, and I will discuss this case tomorrow. Bient Coleman Private Limited versus Punia Priya Das Gupta. Punia Priya Das Gupta. Bient Coleman Company, as you know, the times of name, and that Das Gupta, AIR 1970, Supreme Court 426. In that case, the Supreme Court has laid down the principle that if any word is not used under this section of 1955, this word shall be taken into consideration for the purpose of the definition from the word as prescribed under the 1947 Industrial Dispute Act. It means some provision of the Industrial Dispute Act also applied on the working journalist and other employees of the newspaper sector, because it comes under this factory, it means, and it comes under the industry. If it is being applied the words of the 1947, and some other provisions are there, we will see later on, that it has been mentioned that if any law is not clear here, that 1947 law will apply. It means it is a industry newspaper. But Bient Coalman Company case, we will see of 1970 in detail, and page number 426 of that case, which is published in the All India Reporter 1970, Supreme Court 426. That analyze you will do tomorrow for the purpose of the application of Industrial Dispute Act for some other words which are not prescribed under this law. That is very clear. Okay. Then chapter 2, we will enter into that chapter 2. That is the working journalist. Who are the working journalists and what are their functions? How their leaves and the other facilities can be controlled the by that legislative provisions, and what are other aspects related to this subject matter. We say that what is the other conditions of it. It goes up to the section 13, and 13 is divided into many parts. 13 A, B, C, D, and double B, double C, and whatever the double D, it goes up to the 13. Chapter second starts from the section 3, and it is up to the section 3, 13 double D, capital double D. Its relationship is not with others also. Just like the definition we have seen that the words is sub clause is within the bracket. It means the employees, newspaper employees is itself not a complete definition, but its relationship is with the non-journalist. Its relationship is the newspaper establishment. That's why that word is within the bracket. But here under section that 13, 5, and whatever the sections are there, if there is a capital word, it means it is a independent provisions of the legislation. Then up to the 13, we will see all these aspect from the section 3 as a second chapter, second Roman second, as prescribed under the legislation of that aspect of 1955 Act, that is called. Now, working journalist, it is said that for the retrenchment, the definition of the Industrial Dispute Act applied in this matter, and that is the section 25F of the Industrial Dispute Act 1947. It is ready to go, and